It's on. Good morning. Good morning. Why don't we go ahead and get started? Thank you for the heads up, the thumbs up on the speaker. Good morning. My name is Eric Lee. I'm the founder of Skylight, which is not the subject of today, so check us out at skylight.nyc. The reason I'm up here and I'm so glad to be with you all today is that I'm on the board of the Center for an Urban Future. And first off, I just want to thank you all for coming out today, for being here. I want to acknowledge those of you who are joining us on the live stream. Thank you for making time to be with us. The Center for an Urban Future is a think tank focused on creating a stronger and more equitable economy for the city of New York. And we're very interested in expanding economic opportunity for all New Yorkers. Our research generates a lot of attention, helping to raise the visibility of issues, ideas, opportunities that often go under the radar of policymakers. Much more importantly, CUF's research gets results. Our work regularly serves as catalysts for new investments and initiatives in the city. That's why Crain's recently published a cover story titled CUF, the think tank quietly influencing New York's top officials. We write extensively about the vital role that the city of New York plays in workforce training, and boosting pathways to the middle class for New Yorkers. But we've also long made the case that entrepreneurship and small businesses are also critical, not just to the city's economy, not just to our life in neighborhoods, but critical to economic mobility and critical to New Yorkers being able to build wealth. We've published dozens of influential reports urging city leaders to boost support for entrepreneurs and to help the city's great small businesses grow into larger, thriving enterprises. In recent years, CUF's research directly led to the creation of New York City Boss Up, a new initiative that supports entrepreneurs who are living in NYCHA residences. Our research inspired former City Council Speaker Adrian Adams to launch New York City's Minority Small Business Accelerator to help scale up more minority-owned small businesses. Small businesses are more important than ever to New York City's economy. At a time when entry-level jobs are declining, entrepreneurship is a very important pathway to economic success for New Yorkers. Yet, across the 5 boroughs, a growing number of neighborhood-based small businesses are struggling. In the last 3 quarters, business closures have outpaced openings in the last 3 out of 5 quarters. So what we're going to talk about today is the need to strengthen New York's mom and pop businesses and how important that is just right now. I want to give a big thanks to the people who will be joining us and speaking today. That includes the New York City Mom and Pop czar, Delia Owusi, City Council Small Business Committee Chair, Chanel Thomas Henry, and council members Sylvania Brooks Powers, Gail Brewer, and Elise Encarnacion. I also want to just take a moment to thank the Center for an Urban Future team, which is small, incredible, and makes things like today and the research behind today's event and all our events possible. They do outstanding work, and I'm grateful for you all. I also want to give a very big thank you to Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo has been a great partner of the Center for an Urban Future. It's their support that makes today possible. We could not be here without them as our partners. And I'd like to now introduce Chrissy Moore, who's Wells Fargo's Senior Vice President and Community Relations Northeast Senior Manager, and a big champion of mom and pop businesses in New York. Chrissy, please come on up.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you again, Eric, and thank you to Jonathan and the team at the Center for an Urban Future for convening today's conversation, the work that CUF is doing to elevate thoughtful and practical ideas that strengthen small businesses and the city's economy and communities is really vital. Again, I'm Chrissy Moore. I lead community relations in the Northeast region at Wells Fargo. Thanks everyone for being here today. I'm excited for the fireside chat as well as the panel with our elected and appointed officials and organizations that are doing the work every day to support and advance small businesses and advocate for them. Small businesses are the heartbeat of any community, especially ours. Business owners create jobs, they spark economic growth, and they make neighborhoods feel like home. One of the ways that we strengthen communities is focusing on building growth opportunities for businesses by helping them not only get started, but also prepare for what's next so they can grow with confidence. But growth, we know, does not happen by chance. It really is intentional collaboration across sectors, and that's why we look for ways to bring together our resources, our expertise, as well as our relationships to help them grow. So as a company, Wells Fargo is proud to support efforts that strengthen the city's small business ecosystem and elevate the needs of the neighborhood businesses. Strengthening communities is a part of who we are. At Wells Fargo, we've donated more than $8 million to small businesses across New York City since 2020, and part of that has been $108 million in philanthropic giving during that time across the city. So it goes without saying that the challenges that small businesses face are real. That's why we collaborate with nonprofits such as CUF on forums like this. That's why we work with organizations like the Manhattan Chamber on efforts like the Retail Storefront Accelerator, the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce on efforts like Brooklyn Made, and Greater Jamaica, who I know is here, and many others who are really focused on helping businesses have a clear pathway to grow, to have access to capital, and the tools and guidance that they need to turn opportunity into long-term success. So we really appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this event. Thank you, Jonathan, and look forward to continuing to work alongside many of you to support even more small businesses grow across New York City in ways that help them thrive over the long term. So with that, I want to turn it over to Jonathan Bowles, who again is doing just really impressive work here at CUF. So Jonathan.
All right, Delia, you want to come up and join me? Can I get another round for Chrissy and also to Wells Fargo? Thank you, Wells Fargo. And everybody, I'm so pleased to introduce Delia Owusi, who is the New York City mom and pop czar. I couldn't be more excited to have this conversation with you. You know, I think if the job is to bring somebody on to work with and support and strengthen our smallest businesses, there's no better person than Delia. And I'll just say for a second, we've been fortunate, my team and I has probably nagged and bugged Delia a dozen times over the years to ask her questions to get her input for our research on very small businesses. And she's been always so generous with her time and her ideas. But she's also done such important work as the director of the Women's Business Center at the Business Outreach Center Network, BAC. We at the Center for an Urban Future are super big fans of CDFIs. We know how important they are in this small business ecosystem, and BAC is one of the very best we have in New York City. So it's just congratulations on the position, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, I appreciate it. It means a lot. Thank you.
Could everybody join me in just welcoming So I know you've only been on the job for just barely a week.
Correct.
Correct. It's really true. But I'm curious to know about your plans for the position. What do you see as your priorities as the City Hall advocate for New York's smallest businesses?
Well, I would say, well, my first priority is to learn the acronyms. City government is something else from City Hall and just the different agencies. So first task is learning the acronyms, putting faces to names, and thank you. And the different, and the various departments. But after that, or dual track, my next priority is to work with various chambers and bids and community-based organizations, we want to host a series of listening tours around the 5 boroughs. We want to mix it up with associations, various ethnic groups, but then also keeping in mind to also hear from what we call our invisible businesses. So those who work in co-working spaces, who work in food incubators. And so we're hoping to start that pretty soon, like within the next 2 weeks, start engaging various organizations across the city.
That's great, because I know a lot of small businesses feel like they're not always listened to by government. So that's great to hear. Now, you already worked with some of these invisible businesses for many years now, and I'm curious, as you come into this position, like, what's your understanding of the key challenges? What are some of those things that came up again and again from the businesses you worked with at the Women's Business Center?
So I was at the Women's Business Center for 12 years. It was a great experience. You were working with, and it's not just women, it's everyone. But the key challenges that I heard over the years, so there are several. I look at small businesses very similar to consumers. So one would be access to networks and information. So that's a very big factor. Business still is who you know. You'll hear opportunities, contracting opportunities, partnership opportunities, grant opportunities. So access to networks and resources. The next would be access to financing, which we all know is a big one. You have a small business owner, maybe they're starting up, or I don't know, they've received a contract, they go into their bank and they're not able to receive, that initial, initial money, the initial loan. So access to financing. But in addition to that, what I began seeing was also understanding their financials, their numbers. So we would work with clients who would get these big contracts, 6-figure contracts, maybe from the city or from different organizations. But when you look in their bank account, it's just a couple of $1,000s. So just really understanding how to manage the money coming in is one. Commercial rents is a big one. That's on the personal side if you have an apartment, and that's also on the commercial side. I would say those were the procurement as well. I think we have to do better as a city if our mom and pops, our small businesses are getting contracts. The time it takes for payout, helping smooth out that that gap. In addition to, and this is not with city agencies, but with some of our mom and pops, and let's say they're a general contractor, they have submitted a bid, they're a sub on the contract, so that prime may it may extend it 6 months, 9 months, and then that causes a huge burden on these small business owners that are working on very, very thin margins.
I'm curious with any of those issues that you mentioned, like, do you see, I mean, you're one person. I'm sure you don't have a team of hundreds in City Hall, but do you see the office that you're in tackling some of these issues that are big pain points?
Yeah, I mean, I would say so. I have Kelly, she's on our team, the Deputy Mayor's Economic Justice team. I think she's here, but she's great. She's been tackling these issues since the beginning of the year. But yes, I will say that the Deputy Mayor, Julie Sue, is really passionate about, one, just understanding what these rules, regulations, and there are over 6,000 regulations that are burdening small businesses in New York City. So just really understanding the landscape, and then how the DMEJ team, and I try not to use acronyms because I'm still learning them myself, but really understanding how our team can work interagency to help with coordination, communication, and just so that government isn't burdensome to small business owners. They're more of a partner versus, like this big brick wall.
Well, how does that feel to any of you, the office, looking at how government isn't burdensome to small businesses? That sounds like a pretty good thing to do. I want to ask about that because, when I can't tell you how many small businesses I've spoken to over the years that are just so frustrated in their dealings with government. and more of them, although I know that the contracting process you talked about can be very frustrating and timely, but I think for the most part, small businesses are interacting with government when it comes to regulations, with fines, with inspections. And I think that, small businesses tell me that, like, they're not against inspections but like, it just seems like the unfairness, the kind of randomness, the fact that you might have like multiple agencies kind of doing repetitive things or duplicative, and it's hard to tell what's gonna be happening or what they need to be doing. And so there's just a lot of frustration with that. And I'm curious, like, is that part of your mandate to try to make that easier? And how are you gonna kind of help work with other agencies? Like, it's not just SBS, it's these other agencies, health and DOT and buildings. Like, how are you gonna kind of work with them?
Yeah, no, that's a very big point that you bring up and a very important one. So looking at the mayor's Executive Order 11, that's kind of like our roadmap for us in the DMEJ office. So if you look at the Executive Order 11, one of the mandates is for the agencies that interact the most with small businesses, having them kind of come up with like a list of some of the fines, the fees, well, all of the fines and fees actually that are burdensome towards small businesses. So that's the first thing. The second initiative that is being worked on is those agencies that work most closely with small businesses, so buildings, health, transportation, having them submit proposals to the deputy mayor with their ideas on how they can make the process of owning, running, starting a business in New York City easier. And so those proposals are coming in and they're being reviewed by the team. So I think that's the first step, really seeing what's the lay of the land, and then what are their own internal proposals per change.
So you feel like there may be some receptivity among these other agencies?
I think so, because it's coming, top down. Like the mayor, he's on it and he means business. He really wants to make New York City, and for small businesses, him and the deputy mayor really want to make running a small business in the city easier, friendlier, and just provide them with the, kind of like that framework so they can go out and do the beautiful things that they do, whether it's a Zumba studio, a home-based childcare provider, whether you are opening up a neighborhood restaurant, and so.
Great. I love it. I'm curious, Eric alluded to this a little bit in his opening remarks, but like, as you look around the city, and I know you're embarking on this listening tour, but what do you see as the climate for mom and pops right now? Is it a challenging time? Do you see businesses struggling around the city? What's your sense?
As I mentioned earlier, it is a challenging time. I consider small businesses very much like us, like New Yorkers. So the same challenges that we are encountering, so rising costs, rising rents, they're feeling the exact same impacts. But in addition to that, with labor, workforce, et cetera, et cetera. But I am hopeful. I think New Yorkers really do want to patronize their local restaurants, their local cafes, their local bodegas. I even know our corner bodega. They want the personal relationships, right? And that only mom and pops really do bring to the environment and the fabric of New York City.
If there is this challenging environment, one of the things that I know that a lot of small businesses, a lot of mom and pops could use is more business, right? And so, I'm curious, are you looking at opportunities to just kind of make sure people are going to mom and pops across the city? For instance, I think about this, the World Cup that's coming. And I know that we have a mayor who's been really out there and saying hey, this is an opportunity for New York. And obviously he's a big soccer fan, but are there opportunities to make sure kind of people are going out and not just going to a park to watch a World Cup game, but are going into communities where there are mom and pops and shopping and, drinking and eating while they're watching a game?
Yeah, So as a soccer mom, yeah, I'm really excited for the World Cup. But the World Cup czar, she was put in place by the mayor. Her and her team are doing a great job to really coordinate these 1.1 million tourists that are coming into the city and this extra $3 billion of economic activity. But we really want to push all of that activity, or most of that activity, or even some of that activity, to small business owners. And so they have a World Cup toolkit that they are, that they've advertised in collaboration with SBS. They are going out on, mobile van tours around the city just to make sure that our small businesses get some of that economic, that economic input that's going to be coming into the city in the next, 11 days or so.
Great. So I guess we have time for basically one more question, and I think I think a lot of people are interested just in the costs, right? We hear this mayor talk a lot about the affordability crisis. You mentioned the cost of rents. I know we've also heard a lot about insurance costs going up a lot for small businesses. I mean, is this going to be part of what you're looking at? Do you feel like there's some opportunities to not just address the overall affordability crisis facing people living in the city, but also potentially the affordability crisis for small businesses? Are there specific pieces of that you all are thinking about?
Yes, there is. I know the team, I've only been there for a week, but I know the team is looking at specific programs or initiatives that can make it really easier to run a business in the city. So I know they are looking at insurance. There's been chatter. There's a lot of chatter, but what's really great about it is that the DMEJ team, lots of big ideas, and we want to see how we can, where it fits in, where it makes sense, and where we are able to collaborate with the city council, the state. We've been meeting with the state regulatory agencies. So a lot of exciting things and things coming down the pipeline for small business owners.
Fantastic. Well, I know you've only been here a week, so you're such a good sport for sitting and talking through all these issues, which I know you're still figuring out. But I know that all of us here, I think, really are happy that you're here, happy that we have a small business advocate inside City Hall. And so thanks so much, Delia, for being here.
Thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Morning, everyone. Would our council members come and join me on stage, please?
Yeah, I'm looking.
Hey, girl.
Oh, my goodness.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Eli Dvorkin. I'm the Editorial and Policy Director at the Center for an Urban Future. It's my great pleasure to moderate today's conversation with 4 amazing members of our New York City Council. I'll just briefly mention who is up here on the stage with me. If you would like to see their full bios, they're in your packets, and then we'll get right into the conversation. So we're joined today by Councilmember Chanel Thomas-Henry, who's also the chair of the Committee on Small Businesses. Welcome, Councilmember. Councilmember Elsie Encarnacion, Councilmember Sylvina Brooks-Powers, and Councilmember Gail Brewer. Welcome to all of you. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank
Give
you.
me a warm welcome, warm round of applause for our first group of panelists. Thank you so much. So, Councilmember Thomas-Henry, I know you have to leave right on time this morning, so I will start with you, if I may. And not only that, but because you are the chair of our City Council's Committee on Small Businesses. So let's just get right into it. I want to ask you a little bit about what you see, and this council's been very active already in the first few months of the year, that's an understatement. There's a whole lot of issues on your collective plates. I'd love to get your sense of what you see as the top priorities right now when it comes to how this council is thinking about supporting and bolstering small businesses in the city. I know you've got a lot on your agenda, but what's at the top of your list?
So I do want to apologize first for having to leave early, and I have to leave early because today is the Small Business Resource Fair that SBS does every year. So literally I have to run from here to go to there and meet a lot of our wonderful small businesses throughout the city. But I will say, yes, I am proud to be the chair of small business. And there are a lot of things that we've heard this past month for Small Business Month. We've gone around to many of the districts throughout the city to really listen to small businesses and see what their concerns are. So I would say for the committee, what we're trying to do is be very proactive and responsive to what those concerns are. I'll give you an example. One of the biggest things now, there's a law that was passed several years ago with the roll-down gates. So every other business we've gone to this month has said, oh my God, what do we have to do? What do we have to do? And we're like, okay, calm down, take a pause. We're working on it. We're having a hearing next week on it to delay that, and so you don't have to look at those penalties. We were at a cafe in Harlem, and they were talking about some of the fees that they're incurring when it comes to their outdoor cafes. We introduced a bill that will help with that when small businesses have to go and apply for these cafes. Normally, they would have to pay those upfront costs at the beginning. And business owners, every dollar counts. So it's making it easier. And the legislation we introduced is about helping them relieve that burden by allowing them to pay quarterly versus all up front. Making things easily and accessible when we're looking at fines and things of that nature. If they're not detrimental to public safety, how can we help businesses out by just giving them a warning or the like? Helping our businesses grow, especially our minority and women businesses. Not just looking at certifying them, but making sure once they get that certification that they're actually getting access to real opportunities, and not just subcontract opportunities, but prime contract opportunities. So I think throughout the next year, our priority is really to be proactive and very responsive immediately to the needs of our small businesses today.
Thank you, Councilmember. Well, you already laid out several key priorities. I know there's others on the panel, but let me ask you all just a little bit more about what you all are hearing from the small businesses in your communities. When you go out there and you talk to folks in your districts, what do you hear as the greatest challenges or concerns? What do they see as the opportunities? What do you think the businesses in your districts would like to see the city do more of or do differently?
Anyone in particular you're asking that question?
Councilmember, and your colleagues are welcome to jump in too.
Sure. I mean, I think a lot has been said about fines, policies, and structure. What I see in my district, and I cover East Harlem and the South Bronx, is a challenge with the quality of life issues that are happening outside of the businesses, affecting how many people actually walk the corridors, frequent their businesses. It's a space that the council really does have an opportunity to help in. Talking about sanitation, we have an unaddressed drug issue, we have mental health issues in our community, and this is spilling out right in front of some of our small mom and pops that are really struggling to figure out how do they handle what's going on outside while trying to make a profit inside. And so, you know, I'm very grateful to a lot of the bids that are helping with this. This is what they do, right? They talk about how do we really coordinate sanitation, better lighting, cameras, things that really affect how people move around the city and move around our communities to engage with our small businesses. And so those interagency operations are things that we have to work with our police department, DOT. If your sidewalk is being covered, and we've seen this example just recently, the chair came into our district to talk about how the 2nd Avenue subway was affecting our community, affecting our small businesses. They have all of this equipment right in front of some of our businesses that cannot have people stop in, cannot see them. Their banners are covered. And these are things that affect them on an everyday basis. And so we have to stay on top of that and really look at how we support our small businesses and making sure we do marketing. We've done a lot of marketing campaigns to help support our small businesses. But again, if we're not looking at how our sanitation, lighting, police, Department of Transportation, and all of these agencies are really working together to support our small businesses, then we're missing the mark, right? I mean, I think that all businesses are trying to do everything right. They're following the rules. They're trying to, you know, stay on top of changing legislation. But right outside of the doors, they're struggling even getting people to walk inside. And so it's something where I think that we can effectuate change by really looking at it holistically and from like a real ground level and community level. So I look forward to continuing to do that work. We've been trying really hard on both sides of the district. It's a challenging district, but we have some great partners, and so with our bids and with our agencies. So I look forward to that.
So good morning, everyone.
And thank you for the opportunity to be on here in such a dynamic panel and talking about an issue that is definitely near to the heart for me. I represent communities across Southeast Queens. I often brag about the district I represent, which is home to so many small businesses, and my district is predominantly homeowners. So with us, it is a tangled web when we talk about our small businesses. So for our small businesses to succeed, that means that our community thrives, because that means we're keeping homeowners within their homes. We're keeping people employed who are often locally hired. Back in February, we were able to host our amazing chair for the Committee on Small Business and bring her to the district for a Black History Month small business roundtable and walkthrough, where we got to go and talk to businesses in the community, but also to just have a round table and have a conversation to understand what some of the issues are. The reality is, while small businesses have begun to bounce back since the pandemic, it is not the same anymore. What we have found is, when you look at small business and their workforce, it is still about 28,000 people below what the numbers were pre-COVID. And we have now a changing dynamic where you see a lot more solopreneurs, and you see businesses operating more on a trim staffing when you think about it. And so a lot of the challenges we were hearing are some of the ones that always existed, whether it be access to capital, high rent, all of those type of dynamics. But we also are hearing about challenges with your brick and mortar versus your vendors. So in the city council, as many of you may know, we introduced passed legislation last term that was led by and championed by Councilmember Sanchez, where the bill started one way, but it had to evolve over time to take into account what we were hearing from some of the small businesses as well. And there was a lot of frustration around that. And as the chair mentioned, some of the laws that we pass, while with good intention, sometimes have unintended consequences. So it's about talking to our small businesses, listening to them, and being okay with going back and trying to have to adjust some of the laws. So when you talk about the roll down gate, right now Councilmember Stevens has a bill, which I'm a co-sponsor on, to be able to revisit that conversation. When we talk about sanitation, we want our streets to look clean, but we don't necessarily want to resort to fines and penalties right away. We want to make sure that these businesses have the education and resources they need to ensure in front of their businesses are clean. So we hear a lot of the concerns, but in this council, we are very committed to our small businesses. So I was really excited when I heard about the panel about the mom and pops, because a lot of times people don't really focus on that, and they really need the support in a changing economy right now.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you. I'm Gail Brewer from the Upper West Side. I know a little bit about Manhattan, too, so I have a sense of... I don't know a damn thing about Queens. I don't know a damn thing about
She
Queens.
loves Queens, by the way, and Rockaway.
I do love Rockaway. I worked in Rockaway. That A train sucked, though, to take out there. Okay, so I have a couple of issues to answer your question. First of all, I think there are about 183,000 small businesses in New York and 1 million workers and 25% of all jobs. And one of the worst situations, of course, is Trump with his immigration policy. So that's hurting badly if you answer your question specifically. Number two, Manhattan has that god-awful commercial rent tax. One person just paid $70,000 for that CRT from Murray to 96th Street. And we have not been able to get rid of it. We want to get rid of it. That is a problem for the Manhattan businesses. Also, the health department. And I'm sorry if anybody here from the health department, but for God's sake, I mean, 3 hours at a little restaurant that only has 10 tables, and then, you know, when the sign is just tilted a little bit more the wrong way, you give them a violation. So I just wrote to the commissioner and said, you know, come on, enough with the health department and that kind of participation. Also, technology. A lot of the small businesses don't have technology. They need it in different languages, portals, SBS to help them with that. When I just met with the Manhattan Chamber of Commerce, and they're wonderful, just like the other chambers, one of their issues was just communication. So we had a whole range of businesses on the Strip There's no bid there. I like bids, but they don't have to be on every inch of every street. Because you end up paying. It's not free. If you are owner of a building, you're going to pass that on to the individuals who are your commercial tenants. They pay, not the owners. So I would like to see more communication somehow so that these bars are wonderful now. They're doing Pilates, and they're doing karate, and they're doing stuff that adds to the discussion that could in fact be from another business down the street. That's what's happening if it's working well. I talk to businesses, you cannot survive if you don't have an online presence, if you're like a small store, Manhattan clothing, for instance. So we need to help people with online. It is the only way. 20% of your business, if you are really going to make it, has to be online for the right business. And the problem is the owners won't rent to you if they think you're going to be hampered by online. In other words, if you are not using online, they're not going to rent to you. That's what they tell me over and over again. I also want to just say the issue of just complicated. I love MBWE, but it's complicated to sign up for. I have friends who want to be in the program, but they're a two-person organization, and they don't feel that they can fill out the paperwork. So that's something that needs to be looked at. Vacancies. You know, if you have a vacant one next to you, that's going to bring the homeless. It could bring scaffolding. It could bring trash. So we have to work on the vacancies. I actually have a bill, which I appreciate in September we're going to hear, that talks about keeping, if you have a new lease, it would say the owner has to talk to you, you have to get a lease, you have to have much more opportunity to have information up front. Maybe there's a whole bunch of leaks in the premises, et cetera. So Intro 90, I hope, will be heard. I've been working on this issue since 1980 with Ruth Messinger. That's how long we've been talking about commercial rent. So commercial rent is the issue, but it's not something that you can solve overnight. I don't know that we're ever going to get commercial rent control. I don't know if it's a good idea. I don't know if it's a good idea to tax from Albany the vacant storefronts. But we have to figure out how to get some of these owners, maybe put much more art in the vacant storefront, something that brings activity. That would be another suggestion. I also want to make sure that we have the DOT outdoor dining. There's a backlog for the restaurants. There's a lot of concern about the process and how long it takes, and signing off by the controller's office. This is a new project, obviously. It hasn't passed yet. Right now, we're still going April to November, but there is a push to have year-round. What does that mean? How does it work? All those issues. I think, again, just back to the digital platform issue, when I was borough president and pandemic, we went to almost every single storefront in Manhattan. And there are so many languages and there are so many concerns, so the language issue also has to be addressed. I have a bill that says if you get a fine, you got to make sure the person understands it because the language may be a barrier. So those are some of the issues.
Well, thank you, Councilmember. You know, I have it on good authority that Councilmember Brewer has visited every small business on the Upper West Side, so it sounds like you've done your listening tour. But we have maybe 10 minutes. We can, I think, solve all of these problems in the next 10 minutes or so. Well, at least we'll try. But I wanted to ask about, I think, two sides of this equation. You all have brought up, I think, the same experiences, and Delia spoke to this as well, that every New Yorker faces around affordability. It's really a two-sided challenge. It's, you know, how much is your income and how much is your rent? You know, if you are a small business, you're dealing with how much are you paying out the door every month and how much you're able to bring in. And I want to ask you all about some of your specific ideas around both sides of this equation. So when it comes to expenses, I think many small businesses will say, look, it's really the city that's boosting all of our expenses. That year after year, the city does more to make it more expensive to run a small business than to make it less expensive. And then on the other side of the equation, I'm really interested in this idea about, as my colleague Jonathan mentioned earlier, what else can the city do to help small businesses get what they maybe want most of all, which is a little more business, you know, bring in a little more revenue, help make those margins a little bit better. And so, you know, I know, for instance, we have two council members up here that have led major projects for our two airports, LaGuardia and JFK. I think it's a really interesting combination of efforts that help make sure that more of those dollars that
I
are being
won't tell
spent.
you which one is the better airport. LaGuardia.
Well, I did just fly.
LaGuardia. Best airport 2 years in a row.
I just flew into LaGuardia yesterday and I'd say, thank you. What a transformation. But let me ask you about, on that side of the equation, what is it that you all think that the city council specifically could do to actually bring some of these costs down? You mentioned roll gates, so we can put that on the list. But what are some of those other things where the city could actually help make it a little bit more affordable on the cost side? And simultaneously, what are some of the ideas you may have to help our great small businesses do a little bit more business? I would love to spend some time on all of your ideas on both sides of the equation. Maybe, Chair, I'll start with you.
Okay, not a problem. I think there's a lot of things. I would say first and foremost, when you start a business in New York State, and again, I was formerly a small business owner. When I started my business, I got so much junk mail from all these paid-for providers. So like, you can pay us, we'll get you certified. You can pay us, we'll help you find funding. You can pay us, we'll do that. There should be a system where when a business signs up with the city, they're automatically getting information from SBS, who provides free resources that are funded through the city for small businesses to thrive. There should be, if you're in Brooklyn, you should know Randy from the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce. If you're in Manhattan, you should get information from Jessica about the Manhattan Chamber of Commerce. And all these resources that are free for businesses. Because again, you're stepping out on faith and starting this business, sometimes with your savings. So to make resources more accessible to businesses is first and foremost, and free resources at that. More access to capital. When we talk about BAC and I see Greater Jamaica Development Corporation, again, these are CDFIs that are in our communities to help our communities get access to capital at low interest rates. Things that we can look at in the city, sometimes I know there have been no interest loans to low interest loans to help, because small businesses, they're afraid of loans. Right? They don't want that extra debt. So how do we limit those barriers to provide more access to capital? When you talk about cost, again, I visited Councilmember Encarnacion's district, and we talk about rent. They have La Marqueta, which is, I think, a perfect model of low rent space where businesses can start out, and I know she's had a number of success stories where they started in this space that EDC manages, and were able to grow their business. When I was in Councilmember Brooks Powers' district, we had a proprietor who talked about social media changed her business model. When foot traffic was slow, she's literally became an influencer to help bring traffic into businesses. So when we're looking at the resources and the seminars and classes that SBS provides, are they about AI? Are they about technology and how to promote your businesses through technological advances? And oh my goodness, sitting in Gail's district in times, we were at a panel discussion. It's about being out there and listening to businesses.
That was in Harlem.
That was in Harlem, but it was in Manhattan.
Yes, it was.
All Manhattan is right now, okay? But we were there together, Gail. I think it might have been Maloney's. It was somebody else who did, but we were there together. But
Yes.
we were there together to
Yes.
listen to the concerns,
They were
real
fabulous.
concerns
They were fabulous.
of businesses, and I think that helps us inform our decisions, right? So as policymakers, sometimes we have to step back and listen to who those experts are on the front lines to help make policy changes that really impact them for the better.
Yeah.
And just adding on to the chair, what I will say about the two redevelopment programs, it created an opportunity where we were able to leverage a large-scale project to impact local businesses through the incubation of small businesses at the airport. So at LaGuardia, where they've been successful is promoting things that have been made in Queens through Queens Economic Development Corporation, which is also being replicated at JFK Airport as well to create those opportunities. But some of the things that we need to do is, as Councilmember Brewer shared, when we look at different opportunities such as the MWBE program, it is so cumbersome for folks. It takes months, if not years, for some people to just get certified. We need to have simpler procurement systems as well, faster payment timelines, because I say it all the time, the city is probably one of the worst people to have a contract with in terms of your payout.
True.
I hear some people in the choir here, yes. And those are things that we've been intentional to try to work through as well. More technical assistance, as the chair mentioned, as well as stronger enforcement of participation goals. So in the council, we had a bill that I introduced, Intro 23, which was passed last year, that required the city comptroller to generate an annual MWBE report. so that we can have greater transparency, and it could be a conversation tool as well. And that's just in, the MWBE space, but when we're looking broadly in terms of our small businesses, we have to be able to find ways to promote and educate our small businesses and meet them where they are, because we can't have an expectation that they're going to be able to come out, because we don't know how valuable that forum is going to be for them to leave their business for 4 hours, to travel there and be there and walk away and not have any opportunity from there. And so what we found, even when we were building out the Jamaica Information Center with the JFK redevelopment program, I was getting frustrated at one point, Councilmember Williams and I, Debbie Speaker Williams and I, when we were putting out these RFPs and nobody was responding. So one evening we had to get on the phone and start calling businesses. We had to start looking them up. Like, why are you not applying? They're like, well, first of all, we don't want to deal with any government contracts, is what we were told. Two, we didn't know if this was real. We get hundreds of these type of communications. And so it required us to do that work. And so sometimes with these contracts, if you truly are trying to meet the standard in terms of local participation or MWBE participation, it requires that prime person or the person putting out that contract to do that extra step, because it is overwhelming for our small businesses. And so we do lean on partners like Greater Jamaica, like RDRC, like Queens Chamber, and I see Brooklyn Chamber is here as well, and depend on them to go out into these communities to bring the resources to them, because it has to be a give and take if we are going to be able to support businesses the way we say we want to.
And I think you also have to put your money where your mouth is, right? You have to invest in programs that bring in small businesses. We have a number of pilot programs out of the district where we put in funding so that they can vend for free, bring community out. We encourage places like our local hospitals to buy from our small businesses. We encourage schools, right, to make sure that they understand where small businesses are available to them so that they can get better contracts, so that they can get the t-shirt guy to make them t-shirts for their softball game, right? We have to be that connection, and we have to make sure that we support it from our own councilmatic funds in some cases, because the relief really takes a long time to come from a citywide approach, right? If we are looking and waiting for policies to be made, then we're gonna, in that meantime, we're gonna see those businesses close, because they close every day in our neighborhoods, right? And so we have to take swift action and make sure that we're building coalition, that we're providing space for businesses to come in, vend for free. It's nothing worse than having a vending opportunity and you have to pay money to set up a table. It's like, give me a break, I don't have any money, that's why I need to vend, right? So we provide those opportunities, bring community in, and it also lets them see who's behind those counters and lets them feel them and experience them in a different way, and lets them experience the community in a way too. And which is why we have that support to fight for our small businesses, because they're part of the community, they make the community. We lose a business, we lose part of our identity in our community. And so we, so I'm always very proud. If any of you want to come in and check out East Harlem Nights, we're having one tomorrow on 104th Street where we have free vending and we have some music and we have food and culture, all happening in the community, because again, we know that we have to support our small businesses right now while we work on the long-term solutions, which is the policy, which is, finding grant money, finding all of these opportunities. There's ways that we can effectuate change immediately, but we have to stay on top of it, and we have to invest some of our monies as well.
I think you asked about bringing the cost down and trying to get more customers. So in terms of more customers, years ago, it didn't really take off, but I passed a .NYC. And the thing is, it hasn't really taken off. So like if you're a customer and you're trying to find a table, I refuse to go online. I'm one of the people in the world, probably the only one. But it's hard. You have to find a store that has the right table that you want. And it would be great to have some more .NYC, so I would buy in New York City. So that's an issue that's not taken off. Second, the tourism. We need to do a better job, despite the great work that NYC Tourism does, in getting, we're obviously talking about FIFA and all of the current, but generally we have to have them go into the neighborhoods, know that they're there, then to tell people from Australia that they can go to East Harlem, they can go to Southeast Queens, and blah, blah, blah. That doesn't happen in a systemic way, and maybe it's funding. So that if it's a funding issue, we should address it, because tourism, I know for a fact, my husband used to be in the industry. If you tell people from Australia or Brazil too that there's a wonderful program in East Harlem, they'll go, but they have to know about it. So tourism would be another way to get customers. People don't want loans, they want grants. So if you're gonna give a loan, they're not gonna do it. And the other thing is when the federal government comes in, I remember years ago the federal government was gonna come in, and I was working for Dinkins at the time, and they'd already said in Los Angeles when there was a fire or something, everybody has 2 sets of books, I'm just telling you. So they don't want to have the feds come in or anybody else and look to give them a loan. So give them a grant or don't give them any money. They want grants. You know, this fines and fees, I mean, it's probably illegal to have an A-frame, but how are you supposed to know that that store is there? Because I know there's a worry that maybe somebody who's blind might run into it, but you have to deal with the issue of fines and fees. And really, I heard earlier the talk that the mayor's office is seriously looking at this issue. People have been looking at this issue, but it's not really in depth. And the city council, I hate to say, we pass some stupid bills sometimes for small businesses. So we really have to look to see where is it necessary and not. That A-frame is illegal right now, and yet everybody puts it out. So maybe it should be legal, I don't know. So all of this fines and fees needs to be looked at. And then just when we just had a wonderful forum in the Women's Caucus, which I co-chair with Rita Joseph, and all women business owners came. And their issue was staffing. You know, just to keep staff is hard because they don't have a lot of money. So you have to think maybe as a city, how we can be more supportive of mom and pop staff in some way. What is it that they need? Because they don't get paid a lot. Do they need more childcare? Do they need some kind of better health insurance, et cetera? In fact, that was the biggest issue at the Women's Caucus about the small business owners just keeping staff very, very difficult. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Vito. I said we'd solve all these problems in 15 minutes. We got close. We got a little more work to do, but truly I could talk policy with the 4 of you all day. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
It's been great work you do. Thank you. Good luck with the rest of your day today. Thank you all again so much for joining us. We will get right into our second panel. So if our group of plenary panelists could come join me on the stage.
Hey, how's it going? How you doing? Hi, how are you? Pedro.
Now I have some.
Hey,
I have to really step it up.
good to see you again.
Good to see you again.
How are you?
We should take off our.
All right, we'll get right into it. Good morning again, everyone.
Morning.
Morning.
A little quieter between panels. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
That's a little better. Thanks again to everybody for joining us and to all the folks who are tuned into the live stream as well. And just so you know, we will take questions and get your ideas at the end of this panel. So stay tuned and hang in there, and we'll get your questions online as well. Let me just briefly mention our panelists today. I'm so thrilled that you all are joining us today for this conversation. And then we'll just get right into it. But from my right, I'm joined by Jessica Walker, who is the president and CEO of the Manhattan Chamber of Commerce. Pedro Suarez, the executive director of the 3rd Avenue Business Improvement District in the Bronx. Justin Rogers, president and CEO of the Greater Jamaica Development Corporation. Vic Lee, the co-founder and CEO of Welcome to Chinatown. And Randy Pierce, who is the executive director, president and CEO of the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to all of you. Thank you so much for joining us today. Give one more round of applause for our panelists. And folks, just make sure you get your microphones close, especially for the folks tuned into the live stream. That's the best way for them to hear us. So let's get into it. We already laid out, I think, some of the challenges that folks are hearing around the city, but you all are talking to businesses every single day, to mom and pops in particular, hearing what they're experiencing and understanding their challenges and their frustrations. So rather than relitigate all of the things we've already heard, I guess I'd like to start by asking you, are there some key challenges that you haven't heard so far today? Things that you feel like they're going under the radar, businesses know it, policymakers maybe don't, or they don't get aired out in forums like this one. What are you hearing that you think has not been part of the conversation so far today? Maybe Jess, I'll start with you, because I know you just talked to a whole bunch of business owners for the Chamber survey, but what are you hearing that we haven't heard yet so far today?
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And Gail Brewer dropped the mic, so she said a lot of the things that.
Ding, ding, ding.
Thank you. No, so I would say that the biggest thing is that it's not one thing, that it's many, 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 many things on top of each other that are a crushing weight at this point. And we can get into that all day.
Well, I think what I'll share is that did come up in the earlier conversation is lack of capacity. When we think about lack of capacity, you know, most mom and pops are 1 or 2 people at most. And in the Bronx, there's only one business solution center for an entire borough, and my district has 300 to 500 businesses. So when you think about capacity and technical assistance, we invest in what we prioritize, right? So thinking about, you know, what it takes to engage with businesses and give them resources, you have to go to them. You cannot expect a business owner, again, to take 3-4 hours to go somewhere if they don't know what they're going to get out of it. So, you know, I think really investing in that is major. The other thing that I wanted to mention was we have to start thinking about supporting, you know, mom and pop businesses as an ecosystem, not just as individual businesses. So what does every neighborhood, every ecosystem, what does it need for small businesses to thrive? The more that you circulate dollars in the neighborhood, the better off everyone is. In the Bronx, and I'm sure this is true in other boroughs, there's a lot of consumer leakage. People are going to other parts of the city. They're going to New Jersey. They're going to Westchester. The Bronx is very much about its cars. They like their cars. But that's because of access, right? People have cars because of access issues. And so the more that we can make sure that all the components that are needed to thrive are there, childcare, jobs, you know, supply chains, making sure that all of that is accessible in the Bronx, that's really what's going to bolster and allow businesses to thrive. Right now, a lot of businesses are thriving, those that are thriving despite the challenges. And so we can make it much easier for businesses to thrive instead of just always talking about how resilient they are.
One we didn't hear was tariffs, especially when it comes to product retailers. I mean, in the beginning of the year, last year was complete uncertainty because the tariffs went up and down and up and down. You know, businesses could factor in if they know exactly what's coming down the road, but the tariffs have taken a bite, particularly in immigrant-owned retailers that are sourcing product from home and selling to their community. So tariffs, Gail hit almost everything that we wanted to say, but tariffs are one that is also adding to the cost equation. Yeah.
So one thing that wasn't said was BRT, Bus Rapid Transit. So Queens is a driving community, as we all know, and there are new busways specifically in Queens. And I know on Jamaica Avenue, small business sales are down about 30 to 40% because foot traffic has decreased because of the new busways. So Bus Rapid Transit.
Mm-hmm. A couple of things. I think first is we're losing generational businesses. Succession planning is been a huge challenge, particularly in immigrant enclaves like Manhattan's Chinatown that we serve. I guess this can also be seen as an opportunity, but when you think about AI in the workforce and potential for like kind of job elimination, especially in kind of what would have been seen as higher like white collar jobs, I'm personally seeing a lot more people moving into fractional workforce. But in the fractional workforce, there's a lot more challenges when you think about what is your health care, then also your personal business insurance, how do you get incorporated? But there is that opportunity now to have fractional workforce actually help small businesses who are lacking capacity, but then we also need to help grow that fractional workforce and also the creative economy too. That's really been challenging with AI. And the last thing that I would definitely want to double click on is I agree about healthcare. Aside from like childcare, thinking about caregiving now for small business owners, particularly those that are children of small business owners, if they're thinking about taking on those small businesses and so forth, how do they manage the caregiving component as their family members are aging?
Thank you, Ben. Well, you all did, in fact, dig up a whole bunch of other challenges. So I'm starting to see this real thicket of issues that we have to untangle today. But as we start to do that, or as you all help us do that, Jess, let me bring you in one more time to talk a little bit more about what you just learned in your State of Small Business report. You just published this new study. I guess I'd love your top level. What is the state of small business in New York right now? Normally, the answer is always, it's strong. But is that what you see? I mean, when you think about the state of small business, and what do you see as the biggest learnings from that research?
Okay, I want to get this right because I see small business owners that I really respect in the audience. I want to do them right here. We tried to give well, let me back up. We know that there are so many different economic signals happening right now that it's so confusing about what's actually going on. So what we were trying to do was to provide the context that policymakers need to understand what's going on. That's what we set out to do. The grade we gave was a C-, which many small business owners have told me they do not agree with. They think it's worse. I will tell you, though, that grade comes with, it's weighed down because of cost pressures. Certainly that's the worst thing that's happening right now, and it is really, really bad. So we can talk about that. But there is optimism there because the score is actually elevated because of the opportunities. Clearly the Summer of Opportunity, FIFA, and some of the other things happening this summer, and AI, which is a threat, but also an opportunity.
So I'd like to maybe talk a little bit more about the expense side, the cost side of the equation. I mean, we've heard from so many small businesses that we've talked to and the small business support organizations we've talked to that expenses have just so vastly exceeded revenues in the last few years, that businesses feel like they are under greater pressure than ever just to make ends meet. And a lot of that is because the costs keep rising. And I was talking to get ready for today, I was talking to my local dry cleaner, this guy Jimmy, and I said, I told him what we were doing, and I said, what do you think the city should do differently? And his one-word or his two-word response was, do less. Now, with the Center for Urban Future, we're always thinking about ways to do more. We're always trying to come up with ideas. What should we be doing? What are the new ideas that we should be putting in place? But Randy, I'm going to bring you in on this point because it does sound like it resonates with some of your thinking here too. And what he was getting at, what Jimmy was getting at was, that he feels like what he ends up hearing from city government are all ways in which he's going to have to pay more money to run a business that's not generating more revenue. And so I wanted to ask all of you, but Randy, I'll start with you. Are there some specific ideas around reducing costs that would actually mean the city not only maybe not doing less per se, but taking some things that are on the books right now and getting them off the books, or taking specific legislation that you think may be well-intentioned, but is driven the cost of doing business to an unsustainable level? So when in response to Jimmy, Randy, what do you say?
No, it is do less. I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. Look, I mean, Gail laid out a crisis. I don't know if she intended to lay it out as a crisis, but the one data point that we lost more businesses than started last year, net, first time since COVID, indicates a crisis. And everything that Gail put on the table shows the ways in which government needs to get out of the way. And I'll give you one example. Fines and fees, and I've been doing this for 30 years, and Gail said, hey, look, we've been looking at this, till kingdom come. What's so hard about saying, we're done with indexing, we're done with commissions, Jessica's report already listed the top 10 fines and violations, we know the agencies, the enforcement agencies. What's wrong with just saying, I want our enforcement agencies to reduce fines and violations year over year by 10%, by 20%. I don't care what fines or violations, just in aggregate, reduce the number. What's so hard about saying that? That was what I really wanted to hear from the Mamdani administration, not another indexing activity. That's going to mean, because the enforcement agencies skirt the end result. They figure out ways to substitute new violations, because guess what? They add a revenue number in the city budget on fines and violation collection. What if we just kind of pull that revenue number down and say, this is not about taxing small businesses to balance our budget? Just reduce it. And by the way, if the enforcement agencies can't reduce the overall number of fines and violations, then we'll reduce their enforcement budgets. And we'll get there somehow. Because guess what? If the barbershop that you go to doesn't happen to have the actual price in every mirror on every one of their chairs that you can see, nobody's going to die. It's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. This is New York. We grew up in New York. You go in, you ask the barber, hey, how much is it going to cost to get a trim? Like, this is not that hard. But we have to have the will to want to say, this is not about balancing the budget on the backs of small businesses, so damn it, reduce the fines and violations. That's just one example, but get out of the way is the message. I think that was the message that Gail was putting forth, but just like, get out of the way, man. It's a crisis. Do you care about your neighborhoods? Do you care about your small businesses? Do you want to see them survive? Then do less.
I'll just double tap on that, but also say that the the emphasis should be on education. A lot of businesses, I would say most businesses, right? They want to do the right thing, right? So a lot of times it's really an issue of just not knowing, or a regulation was updated, and again, the information didn't get out because businesses are bombarded with information. And so if the focus is on education, right, within a 12-month period, it should always be a warning. Right? As long as the business is correcting the issue and making, a good faith effort to address the issue, why should there be a violation? And so that's what I will double tap on, investing in education, making sure that people are going out to the community to make sure that businesses have the information that they need to make the right decisions. A lot of times that's not the case. Usually what people are told is ignorance is not an excuse. We passed this bill, the information's out there, you can find it, here's the ticket, and there's really no remorse around that. And so that really can make or break a mom and pop business, particularly in low-income communities.
I think a couple of opportunities looking maybe more like agree with the regulation piece too. I think with technology, there is no longer an excuse for the city agencies not to talk to each other. And that there needs to be much better cross-agency collaboration because that is where the holdup is. One agency is saying one thing, another is saying another thing. And with how technology can be implemented not only in small businesses, but we have to look at that in government too. Another example of this is like I look at these conversations, they're often quite antagonistic. It's either you're all in or this is horrible for everyone and everything. And it's hard to find a little bit of the middle ground. And I think a lot about this with how blockchain and crypto was talked about. When thinking about where is there opportunity to reduce costs, well, blockchain technology, you have the opportunity to have instant settlement. Businesses don't have to wait for payment. And also, depending on what blockchain you're using, for example, like we've piloted things on Solana, fractions of a penny. Like the businesses didn't have to pay any credit card fee or anything like that. So it's like, we should think about, I think the instinct of regulate and like put in those fines, but there's a lot of opportunity for these things that, like the tech, specifically talking about tech right now, where it can be better, but that means you have to understand how these things could be used.
Look, we legislate, and this is a city council issue. The mayor hasn't been in place enough to really augment this, but for the last decade, we've legislated in ways that have disproportionately impacted small businesses in a negative way, because whether it's Fair Work Week laws, whether it's just cause termination laws, you name it, it adds cost to a small business because the corporates already meet the standard. So let's start with just the understanding of the framework that there are two business communities in New York City. There's a corporate business community and a small business community, and they have a completely different set of challenges, needs, wants, and solutions. And if we could just accept that framework, we could stop legislating in ways that disproportionately kill our small businesses.
I want to stay on this. Oh, go ahead, Jess.
I was just going to, two things. My mind is spinning. Of course, I agree with that. One of the things that we have been pushing for is what we call economic impact statements. The chambers are all in on this idea. It's just asking the city council to do a basic economic analysis before passing legislation to really understand the impacts that the law would have on small businesses, business attraction, cost of living, unemployment. This is just common sense, and many other places already do it. So we're trying to get that done. The other thing I think I was going to say was about AI, that I was just going to push that even further and just say that, the city has in the past really thought about their one-stop portal and how to use tech to really try to work with small business owners, which is really, really important. But I do think that there's a lot that can be done behind the scenes, meaning, we should be challenging tech founders, I guess, with stars, tech stars, we could do sort of like a challenge to really try to get them to think through programs and apps. Again, I'm not a tech person. I'm doing the best I can here. But the tech that would allow the AI to run in the background to ensure that the business is able to comply with whatever they need to do. The business owner shouldn't have to do homework at night to learn laws. We can use tech in the background to make sure that the business is already in compliance, just as, whatever form they fill out online, that is going to keep them in compliance, whatever they need to do. I hope that's clear, but I'm happy to talk more about that if not.
Well, we definitely welcome more ideas around lowering costs of doing business in New York, but I do want to talk about the other side of the equation too. What else the city could be doing to help more of our great mom and pops do a little bit better, do a little bit more business. And so I'd love to open it up to all of you, first of all. If there are specific ideas, things maybe that we have tried that work, that we should be doing more of, things that it's frustrating to you that we haven't tried it. I was thinking a little bit in the earlier conversation about some things that we actually did right during the pandemic, including that you all were doing in kind of rapid response to get information out to small business owners, that the city did to have a moratorium on fines and fees, at least temporarily, that the chambers did working together to help strengthen, small businesses. But it also strikes me that we are not in that same moment right now. There isn't I don't see the same sense of urgency from government to say, look, the way that we responded, the government responded to an acute crisis like the pandemic to support or shore up small businesses, to invest in the organizations that support small businesses. It doesn't strike me that we're in that same moment in terms of government's response, but from what you're just saying, Randy, we are still in that moment in terms of the crisis.
Oh, it's worse because there's no bailout on the back end. Yeah. Look, PPP and other things were put in place to get us through the crisis. There is no bailout. So, but there are things that work. Look, the Small Business Resource Network, we launched it during COVID. It's a case management approach to helping small businesses. So that notion of you can't, like small businesses rolling up gates serving customers, they don't have time to go down to a government agency to get support. We'll come to them. The chambers all 5 chambers run this program. It's funded now by the city. It was originally funded by the Peterson Foundation. We got support from Wells Fargo and others to do the online piece where we created free websites for businesses to help on the technology side. So that's a model that works. We can ramp that up, and that's one issue. Second thing, Brooklyn Chamber, we run a CDFI. I know it's unusual for chambers to run a CDFI, Brooklyn Lions Capital. We're a micro lender. But we pioneered a character-based lending program. I know we said everyone loves grants. Grants are gold. But if we're going to do loans, I'm done with interest rates and all this other stuff. It doesn't matter to the small business. What they need is, what you need to address is the underwriting criteria. It is the underwriting criteria that keeps most of these small businesses, particularly businesses of color, out of the capital markets because collateral, guarantors, and credit scores keep them out. So if you wipe away, it's more risky, but if you wipe away that underwriting criteria and you look at character-based lending model like we pioneered with the Social Justice Fund and the Joe and Clara Sy Foundation, you can get more money out the door, you can get more money into the hands of small businesses. You got to be willing to accept more risk. We had a 17% default rate. Wells Fargo's bankers would, have a heart attack if they had a 17% default rate. But that's what you got to be willing to accept because these are the businesses in the community that have been serving the community for decades but didn't qualify for PPP because their payroll was a little sketchy, their taxes weren't filed accurately. They had that 2 set of books that, Gail's were talking about. But we could address that. If you're going to give them a loan, then you have a technical assistance program to address that so that down the road, they can now access capital in a different sort of way, in a more appropriate sort of way. So, but we got to be willing to change the underwriting criteria. If we can't change the underwriting criteria, you're never going to get the actual capital into the hands of these micro businesses in our communities that really need it.
One idea that we've been trying to think about and start advancing is around succession planning and kind of taking inspiration from the National Trust of Historic Preservation. They have every state, they do a designation for kind of like one historic business every state. That business receives a $50,000 grant. I think with the succession planning, I see this as an opportunity for pilots in our neighborhoods. So let's take, for example, like Chinatown, like a Harlem, Bensonhurst too. There's a lot of legacy businesses where I grew up there. And is there a way where we can have this pilot program, and perhaps it's not a grant, but could it actually be maybe like a tax incentive for the independent landlord to allow them to continue to keep the business there whether it's the same owner or if you're transferring that business. But I think we often forget that especially for these independent landlords, to continue to have these legacy businesses there, which are often operating at breaking even or below margins because they just care about the community so much. The landlords also take a hit to keep them in place. So I think creating this type of program that's a little bit more of like an ecosystem and piloting it across the neighborhoods could be really interesting. And I have floated this to Councilmember Kevin Riley, who's interested in this.
I think in the South Bronx, I mean, all these things are definitely true that my colleagues are stating. You know, and at the bid, we try to do all these different initiatives and public events, but the public realm in general is a huge challenge in the South Bronx and certainly in other parts of the city. You know, at the earlier panel, they alluded to quality of life issues, but in the South Bronx, it's a major, I mean, we're in the center of the opioid epidemic. And it's very insensitive to be like, hey, everyone come to this great event that we're doing. Meanwhile, you're surrounded by individuals that are really struggling with addiction and other issues. And, you know, some businesses literally have to spend their morning addressing issues in front of their storefront before they can even open. And so we have to really figure out what coordinated interagency initiatives look like. It really is about relationships. It cannot just be a directive from the top. What are the actual relationships between the commissioners and their leadership staff? What does it look like? Because a lot of times, you know, we've been part of previous interagency initiatives in the past, and you walk into a meeting or a room and everyone's kind of like, what, like, it's like, where do we get started? You know, who's gonna do what? And I think everyone's trying to do their best and sort of lean into their specialty, but we really have to rethink how we're addressing some of these issues because, you know, particularly in the South Bronx, there's a stigma, right? There's a reputation, and that is leading to consumer leakage and people going to other parts of the city. And also there's this issue of oversaturation of certain types of businesses. And so we need to also incentivize that we have a diverse mix of retail, right? It doesn't make sense, right, to have 10 99-cent stores on one block. And we see that a lot of times in low-income neighborhoods, right? And again, they're providing a service that's needed and people need that savings, but people want to see sit-down restaurants. They want to see entertainment. They want to be able to see a movie. They want a reason to linger and explore the neighborhood for more than 20 minutes. And, you know, in the hub where we have, you know, 10 bus routes and thousands of people coming through every day, it's very transactional. People are like in and out as quick as possible. That does not encourage dollars to circulate in the neighborhood. So we really got to think about, especially now that we have this new office of street vending, that's another component that we need to really figure out. Because then we have brick and mortar and street vendors competing against one another oftentimes directly in front of their store, right? And we want to have a positive, good relationship with street vendors because I think that there's a role that they can play for sure in driving foot traffic. But right now, you know, and there's 12 business improvement districts in the Bronx. Many of us are sort of racking our brains, like how do we get control of what's going on the street and really allow people to feel comfortable and safe, you know, shopping at our stores.
You know, I see the lack of technology as a huge issue. Many of our mom and pops don't even have, the only technology they have are their smartphones. They just don't have the funds to purchase iPads, desktops, and so forth. You know, I don't know if it's some type of stipend to small businesses so they could actually purchase equipment. But, you know, I think technology, and you actually stated, I mean, is a huge issue here in New York City. And look, mom and pops can't afford it.
Well, let me ask you then a little bit more about what it would take to help those mom and pops be able to have more of the business that would be able to allow them to reinvest more in their businesses. And I think there's at least a couple pieces of this. You know, there's procurement, there's supply chains, there's, you know, where do you get the dollars from? For the mom and pops that you're describing, Pedro, you're talking also about how do you boost the foot traffic? How do you create inviting, livable streets where people want to linger, as you're saying, not just pop in and out to get a 5-minute takeout order, but to stay a while. But then you're saying, as you do that, you would think, well, the solution must be, let's just make sure that we can help the hub create a beautiful, livable plaza. And then you're saying, well, we did do that, and we encountered some huge challenges to sustain it. I'd like to unpack that a little bit more. And then also, Randy and Justin, we've got, two folks up here, the two of you, who also are running CDFI. So thinking about, well, on the access to capital side of the equation, what would it take to make it so that more of the businesses in your community were ready for an investment, were able to get there, but also so that you would actually have the capacity that you need to do what Randy's describing, the kind of story-based lending that doesn't happen in 5 seconds on a website, but takes, maybe 5 weeks of actually visiting a business owner, multiple times and working with them one-on-one. So I'd love to just get more of your specific thoughts about when it comes to what the city can do to help, whether it's with the public realm, whether it's access to capital, but in particular, the capacity building that you think is needed to do more of what you all are doing, whether it's helping to drive more business, whether that's, and I'm thinking of course, of many New Yorkers who are themselves, facing tight budgets or pinching pennies or spending less locally. And if we are spending money, we're looking online for the best deal. We're not necessarily thinking, hey, I'm just gonna, go to my local commercial corridor because it's convenient. You're thinking, where am I gonna save $3 that actually makes a difference at the end of the month? And that may be different than how New Yorkers were thinking about this, 6 or 7 years
You take
ago.
the tourist money. Look, Gail said this. Gail said everything great today. You take the tourist money. I know everyone expects this big boom from World Cup, but we do things that are antithetical to the success of something like this. The Chamber's asked for a simple modification to Local Law 18 to allow short-term rentals so that we can capitalize in every neighborhood in New York City on the World Cup, just for the duration of the World Cup games. Dismissed without even a discussion from the city council that we couldn't do it. But we had a bill last year that would have corrected all the wrongs that was pulled in December that was on track to pass. So we could do it, so don't tell me we can't do it. So we're gonna lose opportunity. Places in New Jersey are already benefiting from us not being able to activate. Most neighborhoods don't have hotels, number one. Number two, most of the hotels in the neighborhoods, where they are extremely expensive. So that's one thing we could have done to capture more tourism dollars, to benefit more from the World Cup, and we didn't do it. But the theme about focusing in on tourism, and I agree with Gail wholeheartedly, New York City tourism has to step up their game in the outer boroughs in particular, right? That is a theme that we have to kind of really hone in on because they're bringing dollars here because they want to spend, right? Versus average New Yorkers who are feeling a pinch and may not be able to spend like they used to spend. So let's figure out ways how we can maximize the tourism dollars. I just gave you one simple one. Let's, shelve Local Law 18 restrictions just for the duration of the World Cup. City Council said no.
I mean, I think, with the public realm, we definitely need more funding for public programming. That's one piece. So making sure that not just bids, but nonprofits across the city are able to do more public programming is a key component. But then it's also the licensing and permits process that can come with that. It can be pretty onerous. And the World Cup was a perfect example where extremely difficult to really do a lot of activations for smaller organizations and a lot of hoops to go through. So we opted out. We said, we're just going to promote, the local restaurants that are doing, that are showing the games. And that's pretty much it because everything else is too onerous. And it's like the World Cup is literally right around the corner. And it's like, this should have been decided. We should have had a plan a year ago as to what was going to happen across all the different neighborhoods. And we've known about it for 8 years. So that's one example of just like a lot of missed opportunity, particularly in the outer boroughs. The second piece, when it comes to the public realm and a lot of the safety, public safety and homelessness and the opioid epidemic is the city has a very heavy emphasis on outreach to these individuals struggling with these issues. And that's it. It's like, oh, we talked to them and they said they didn't want help and that we moved on. We really need to think about how we're going to address what I think is a public health issue, right? We need physicians, licensed professionals on the street 7 days a week in some communities, diagnosing what is the issue with particular individuals, because not everyone is the same, right? They have certain issues and not others. and really getting to the heart of what it's going to take to address some of these issues. And that has to be consistent. It is not consistent in a neighborhood like the Hub, where we don't even know when some organizations are out there doing outreach. And it needs to be treated like a crisis and responded with resources as if it is a crisis. And so those are our two issues. You know, we've been trying to activate our plaza as much as possible, but it goes back to the other issue. What are we inviting people into when we're doing these events, right? Like, are we being cognizant? Are we setting up these events and activations for success? And I think consistency is key, but then also the interagency coordination has to be more than just, you know, a 3-month, 6-month initiative. It has to be embedded in how we sort of design ecosystems to thrive.
So I'm going to talk very specific to our CDFI. You know, 2 years ago, we made about 35 loans. We had a record year. Stressful because we almost ran out of money. Our CDFI almost ran out of money. Last year, we made approximately 22 loans. But as the council member said, the demand for loans is actually decreasing. There's so much uncertainty on the federal level. People just don't want loans. A lot of people now are calling us for grants. What would be helpful to us is, and I have to thank and give a shout out to Congressman Meeks, who was on the House Banking Committee, because, as I said, we almost ran out of money, and I called him. He was like, I'm gonna set up meetings with all of these banks. 2 banks have the best programs. Number one is actually Wells Fargo, because they have 2% money to CDFIs, and the other is Apple Bank. Apple Bank has, I think, about a 5% rate to CDFIs, but they give you a 2% rebate back as a contribution. You know, our loans, and if my chief lending officer is watching this, I'm in trouble, but usually our loans are anywhere between 5 to 8%, you know, very reasonable. The issue is that most banks want to charge me 5% for my money. So if they do that, I can't charge 5% anymore. I have to charge at least 7%. You know, we were able to work with Empire State Development Corporation, as the council member, Sylvina Brooks-Prowell, stated, at JFK. So we have 1% money provided by Empire State Development Corporation, which is very specific to JFK. That allows us to loan maybe in a 3 to 7% range, specifically for retail and concession opportunities at JFK, up to $1 million, about $1.1 million, $1.2 million. So we've made, to date, probably about 4 or 5 of those loans, and we have several others in the pipeline. But for CDFI, you know, we need reasonable rates so we can borrow to lend to our customers.
Rita, you want to, go ahead, Jess, yeah.
I just have 2 ideas. So one is procurement. I think that we are underutilizing the fact that this is the business capital of the world, and we have all these corporations here who, you know, should be customers, who should be, customers of the small businesses in the city. And I just think that a lot of times they don't even think about it because nobody's asked. So I think we need to start asking. And then I had another point, but I might have lost it.
We'll come back to you, but I mean, Randy, I do want to bring you in just on the CDFI conversation. Any other specific ideas about what the city could do to support our CDFIs to do more of what you do well?
I mean, the city does a pretty good job. Look, the business solution centers, I know I agree, under capacity, but they actually really function well. And a majority of lending actually occurs through the business solution centers. I think there's a program, though, that needs to be around finance readiness versus, you know, when businesses are rejected and they're kind of like sent on their way, before they even get to the point where they're rejected, like we need something like proactively to work with a business, because we know, because they're coming through the Solution Center, a lot of them are not going to end up qualifying to even sit with a CDFI. But if we had a program in place for those types of businesses to get them financing ready, so really some of the basics, like getting your P&L together, like looking at your current credit score and how to repair it and things like that. It's a little bit intensive. Consumer and Worker Protection used to do some of this. I don't know, it never was to scale, but I don't know if they still do it. But something that is more really on the front end before they even get to the point. Because look, CDFIs are businesses too. We're not like the banks. We have a lot more flexibility. We don't have as much capital. But we still have to have, you know, standards in place before we actually lend. I'd love to see something for those front-end businesses. And let me just get back to the customer question. I should mention this. This can't be universally adopted, but it could be replicated in other places. Look, the chamber runs retail stores. We run retail stores, Brooklyn Made stores, and we're an aggregator. So we take folks that are making product, sometimes right at their kitchen tables, and we provide them with an opportunity to be a retailer through us, and with the support of Wells Fargo, which has really helped us to ramp up. We run 2 retail stores, one in Industry City, one in downtown Brooklyn. We just opened up one in Japan. So talking about, like, the Japanese yen works for our businesses here, we'll take it, right? We're talking about ways to get more money. So we just opened up one in Japan. But my point is, like, we're an aggregator helping the smallest micro businesses producing product to get shelf space, get the marketing support, tapping into all the other programs that the Chamber runs. And we're leveraging the Brooklyn brand. I mean, that's the other part of the equation that not everyone's got that. But the Brooklyn brand is universal, is global, and you can walk the streets of Seoul or Tokyo and see people now with Brooklyn hats and Brooklyn sweatshirts and whatever the case may be. I want their yen. I want their won, I want all their money, and I want to send it here to help our small businesses. So, but that's another way. We can look at ways to aggregate for smaller retailers, ways to extend their promotion and their ability to get more product sold.
I want to go back to vacant storefronts for a bit, because one thing that I also think is important is the city currently doesn't have any formal mechanism for emergency funds for small businesses. In the Bronx, we had a huge number of fires, within the past couple of years. One particular fire took out, 6 businesses overnight. And there really wasn't much other than, free legal advice for the businesses. And those spaces are vacant to this day. And so that's one thing that we really have to think about is, in the case of fires and other emergencies, how are we actually helping businesses to get up and running again, because that can completely devastate a neighborhood. The other thing is, and this might be counterintuitive for a bit to say, but I do think that there needs to be more done to, I won't say punish, incentivize property owners that have vacant storefronts, particularly the open lots that we see in certain parts of the city. And as we think about, like, incubators and activating and partnering with small businesses that don't have sort of a formal space in the city, to really activate those spaces is really, really key. We have a 17% vacancy rate in the 3rd Avenue bid, and there are a lot of opportunities to activate those storefronts with artists and other programming, and even municipal-owned buildings that are not being used, really revisiting what to do with those properties, and if it's really stuck in regulatory stuff, the city being more open to selling those properties to nonprofits or other institutions to be used in a positive way.
So I don't want everything to be doom and gloom. In terms of vacancies, what we've done is we've partnered with the Durst organization to create artist gallery spaces. And honestly, all we had to do is buy beer and wine and let them throw parties, but they would activate the space into the night. The community loved it. It worked very well.
I love that. Go ahead, Vicky.
Yeah, I would just add, we're on the storefront incubator side, that's something our nonprofit is in the process of building right now. So we're opening a storefront incubator on 19 Mott Street, and partnered with an independent landlord. The idea of the incubator is trying to diversify the types of small businesses that are in Chinatown, because Chinatown is very food and beverage heavy, so to your point about seeing kind of similar businesses all clustered together. So we're intentionally not incubating food and beverage establishments. However, the important piece of, and we are subsidizing a lot of those costs through private donors. And I think that there is opportunities for cities to empower nonprofits or bids to be able to continue to pilot and expand these. But what we're looking at is giving entrepreneurs who've never had brick and mortar the opportunity to pop into the space. Ideally, we would love for them to open their small business or office in the future in Chinatown, but we're considering it a win if they go into the space and they're like, this is not for me. I actually do not want to open a brick and mortar, and I think that we're losing in the city the ability to de-risk things, because you have to put so much money up front. So we're hopeful that our incubator will be able to add to that idea of how do we de-risk things for entrepreneurs who just want to test and explore and see if they could do it.
Yeah, I love those thoughts about the storefront landscape, and it connects to the public realm improvements. You're talking about how do you support clusters of small businesses that are diverse from one another, they attract people there. I think about some of the biggest levers to potentially do that, and one that comes to mind for me is neighborhood plans, neighborhood scale rezonings. And so I wanted to ask you all, because this is relatively recent news in New York City. The Mamdani administration just announced its first 2 planned neighborhood scale rezonings, one in Brooklyn, south of Prospect, one in the Bronx on White Plains Road. Some of you all have had some real experience with rezonings over the years, including certainly in Jamaica, fairly recently, going back many years. Randy, obviously several in Brooklyn, in your time there. I wanted to ask you all about what can the city learn from the past, or what should the city be thinking about going forward? And look, I think much of the goal, understandably, is on housing production. We've got an affordable housing crisis. We need more housing. Rezoning is arguably the most effective way to get there. But I don't think we hear very much about how do we make sure that these major land use changes also strengthen mom and pop, strengthen neighborhood commercial corridors, although certainly bringing more residents into a community can help. But I wonder what your experience is like in Jamaica, Justin. I wonder, Randy, what do you think is your advice for this administration, not just a kind of across the board when it comes to rezonings, but if we want to make sure that rezoning supports stronger mom and pops, what should the city do?
I mean, look, the city, the housing crisis is the fundamental crisis of our time. And if we don't solve for it, nothing else will matter. So the city is absolutely right to be looking at areas that are currently under development that could support higher zoning, more density, and quite frankly, more people. Now, too often, small businesses, when they hear that change is coming, will come out against a rezoning. This to me is like counterintuitive. Because of what you just said. More people living in your immediate vicinity equals more customers. This is not that hard of an equation, but it gets caught up in a very NIMBY-ish kind of fight. Existing residents don't want change. They lean on small businesses get the wrong impression, and so on and so forth, and it spirals downward. And by the way, we're going to see some of that play out too in the ones that were just announced. I was just hearing yesterday from Monitor Point, which is not a rezoning, but it's a large development project, where I saw it spiral downward because 41% affordability is not enough. But my point here is that addressing the housing crisis through increased density is ultimately helpful to local small businesses. Now, could we look at incentivizing ground floor retail as part of all of the new development that's coming in? Sure. I think we try and do a good job around that. But we also have to be careful about flooding. I think someone said this before, bringing on new commercial space when you've already got a vacancy challenge, and therefore making the crisis even worse in a particular area. So there's a balance there that you got to strike, and it's a short-term balance because long-term, if it works, you're going to have more people living there, and there's going to be more need for commercial and retail support. So support many of these housing plans. Don't be such a NIMBY critic, because this is what we need to kind of move the city forward, and it'll ultimately be good for the small businesses.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Go ahead. No, he mentioned Jamaica, so go ahead.
So, the Deputy Speaker, Dr. Natasha Williams, did an excellent job in having visioning sessions for the community. The issue is that mom and pops just didn't have the time to make a lot of these visioning sessions because they're working 15 to 20 hours a day, 6 to 7 days a week. I mean, she would have visioning sessions in the evenings, but a lot of the mom and pops still weren't available to be included. So, something that should be looked at is the fact that maybe virtual visioning sessions where mom and pops could participate and just, listen and then provide feedback as well. So I think, virtual visioning sessions would be very helpful.
What I wanted to add was, when we're thinking about zoning, we really got to tie that to the financing piece, right? If you want certain types of businesses to go into these storefronts, how are you actually making that possible and less risky for property owners? Because going back to the vacancy issue rate, it's not that people are not inquiring about the space and making offers. It's really, there's this challenge of what's the build out that's needed. Is that affordable? Can they build that into the monthly rent? Is it an upfront cost that needs to be spent? And so as we think about rezoning, we really got to think about how are we making sure that the intended impact of the rezoning is actually possible, that we're not just doing the rezoning, but then none of those things that we want in the neighborhood are actually viable or possible. And so that's something that we experience in the South Bronx pretty consistently.
I appreciate that. Well, thank you all so much for your thoughts, your ideas, your time. I want to turn it over to our audience. You're welcome to give a round of applause for our panelists, but thank you all. But we're going to turn it over to all of you. So my colleagues have microphones. Please put your hand up. I'll call on you. We'll start in the back. I'll call on you, and just let us know your name. If you're here with the organization, please keep your question or your idea very brief, so we'll get to as many hands as we can. And for questions online, I will be seeing them from my colleagues, so feel free to ask them there as well. So yeah, keep your hand up. We'll go to the very back of the room. Microphones coming your way, and then we'll go from there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. First of all, amazing. Thank you all so much for sharing your time and insight. One thing that I think that we all heard, there were a couple of keywords we heard over and over again, things like ecosystem and capacity, right? And how those two things are interacting in the public realm, on our streets, and in our small businesses, which are fundamentally the intersection of where all of these things happen, right? They are the place where all of the cracks are slipped through, right? They're the place where all of the policies converge, whether or not the agencies and the bids and city council have talked to one another, right? And so what I work Grand Street in Brooklyn. We are thinking of all of the same things that you have all been talking about. I don't know if you could see me on the verge of combustion while some of this panel was speaking. And I will just say, like, when we talk about capacity, I used to work with Randy and Jessica, going door to door and meeting the small businesses where they were to kind of make up the difference of capacity that we keep butting up against. And so I guess my question is, how can we create those ecosystems to sort of self-sustain? We can do policy interventions, one-shot deals, rezonings, but what we're looking at is a system of pressures, right, that the small businesses are facing. Some of those pressures we don't have control over. Randy said, tariffs and costs increasing, for example. And some of them we do. Some of them are very light lifts, right? Like, we've been waiting 5 years for DOT to remove our Jersey barriers so our businesses can load across the bike lane. We've been talking to SBS about, the funding of industrial business, support mechanisms. And so I think that, when we talk about all of these things, we're all in different rooms having different conversations. For example, I didn't know, Vic, we're working on some of the same things, which is really exciting, and I had no idea. So how can we kind of bring some of these communities together, have these conversations in a way where they can be better coordinated, the light lifts can be lifted, and the interventions can be successful rather than running aground of conflict?
So bids and merchant associations work. I want to give a shout out to the bid world. Not everybody could have a bid. So first step could be a merchant association. Any commercial strip can help develop a merchant association. The city does have a good program, the Avenue NYC program, that actually helps to incubate merchant associations. They're like mini chambers, right, for a small commercial area. When you have an organized entity on the ground that could be a voice, it's much easier then for you to advocate for a commercial strip or a geographic area. So, we got Perch in the room, Theo is here, Jeanette is here. When it comes to bid stage, you call them because they help you to try and convert a merchant association to a bid. But if you wanted to develop a merchant association, you work with your local elected official, you work with your local chamber, because we do this work in terms of the merchant organizing, you secure an Avenue NYC grant and maybe some discretionary capital, and you start getting the process rolling to get that particular commercial area organized. Because if you're organized, you have a bigger voice, and you could actually advocate on a much higher schedule. So I would say merchant associations, bids, they really, really do work, and we got to give them the credit they deserve.
Awesome, thank you. Let me just see hands again so I can get a better sense of the room. So we'll go to the fourth row right there, and then we'll go to Holly in the third row. Just get the microphones to them right away, and we'll take your questions. Thank you.
Hi, thank you all. So there's some strong evidence that small business owners care a lot more about their workers and are more likely to want to invest in taking care of their workers. And so while that has a lot of benefits, it also really of course, has a real consequence and financial burden on the small businesses. So the question is, what can we do to take the burden off of small business owners onto the city, other players, to take care of low-wage workers, especially as you're talking about, Vic, how we can think about preserving job quality for low-wage workers who are already in the workforce while growing the small business workforce if there are all these massive layoffs in the corporate economy.
I think that, well, first in looking at, there's a consumer side to it too, where I think that for businesses who, like, in order to take care of their workers, we have to pay more. We have to be able to provide healthcare options. But on the consumer side, that also means you have to understand that you are going to pay more, and supporting those businesses that are advocating for their workers. The other end of this I really see is like looking at the worker ownership as well, and like looking at how do we support businesses who are interested in exploring that path to employee-owned businesses. And in talking with kind of a lot of small business owners who, sometimes there's also small business owners where it is exhausting. Like I have friends who are business owners, they've been doing it for over a decade now, and they're not sure how they should exit. But there could be a real pathway to thinking about how you take care of a business. There's the succession planning element, then also there is the side where more and more studies are showing that having employee say in this actually helps to increase revenues in the business. So I see that as a real potential, and I know that the city has been looking at being able to support funds that help to convert for either employee ownership, or also looking at like community ownership of businesses. So I think that's an area to explore.
Universal child care and address the housing crisis. Those are the two things you can do to really help the workers. And we're doing universal child care. So kudos to the Mamdani administration and the state. It's a big, big cost for the average worker. And now let's address the housing crisis too. And those are the two things that you can do to really help workers.
Can I also just add that I think portable benefits, the time has come for that discussion. I don't know if people know the history, but health insurance through your employer, there's like a whole history of how this came about, but it doesn't have to be that way. And I think especially since the fastest growing small businesses are now solo entrepreneurs, they don't have to pay for any of this. And so there is the clear competitive advantage to doing so that really does, again, put all the onus on storefront businesses. So it's something we really need to think about.
One thing I'll just add real quickly is that, and this could be replicated, I think, with businesses, but the bids themselves, there's about 25 business bids that entered into a cooperative to provide health insurance for their employees together. And so really encouraging small businesses, to find ways to work together to provide more benefits for their employees is something that I think is low-hanging fruit.
Great, thank you. Yeah, right there, and then yeah.
Hi, my name is Holly Diamond. I'm a CEO of a company called Work Onward, but I'm a small business owner. We have a mom and pop restaurant in Manhattan. So we've been collaborating well with the Manhattan Chamber of Commerce and the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce. And about 3 years ago, I asked this question here in the Center of Urban Future. How can tech startup company could have a partnership, public-private partnership? Because what I do is I build AI for small businesses, and I know the small business owners have a thin margin, so we remove all the paywall barrier. We make posting a job all for free for small business owners. I've been interviewing about 300 immigrant minority women-owned businesses across the 5 boroughs of the city, and there's key challenges that I think that we all need to think about and address is mom and pop owned businesses. There are 2 types of mom and pop owned businesses, in my opinion. There's one solopreneur with a single location, and there's a mom and pop owned businesses that they're doing very well, and then they're opening multiple locations. We really need to focus on helping the solopreneurs and the single locations. They're underutilized with the technology, with the AI, with the support and the CDFI and grant. My question to you all is, how are we going to, first of all, I want to partner with everybody to provide all the AI, the free AI for the small businesses, creating a website, helping with the marketing support, and then for the staffing shortages, small business owners don't even have enough margin to pay and hire workers. And a lot of workers who work in the mom and pop businesses, they have multiple jobs. They go from one location to another location. So what we try to do is, as all the districts here, how can we collaborate together in creating more job opportunities, easy access for workers so that they can have multiple jobs but be able to have a sustainable income. And also at the same time, how can we support solopreneurs who have a single locations struggling at this moment? Thank you.
So what I'll add is, the city has piloted in the past mentorship programs for MWBEs and other types of businesses, and I think that there's a way to expand those mentorship programs, not just for AI, but I think large accounting firms, I think legal, the SBS partners with the New York Lawyers Alliance to provide free legal assistance to businesses as well as nonprofits and bids. So I think there's a real opportunity to expand those programs and pair small mom and pops, particularly the solo entrepreneurs, with someone that could help them on a specific project over like a 12-month period. And so again, it goes back to the investments we make as a city.
Maybe EDC and SBS can partner on a specific, so they have a small business expo right now, but maybe they can partner on a specific technology expo for small businesses.
That's a great idea.
Great.
Holly, you should work that out.
Sir, yeah, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Patrick Hall, and I own a small business down in the Triangle Below Canal. We do not have a business improvement district, but we are starting a merchants association. I want to just thank the Center for Urban Future and Wells Fargo for just making something like this happen today. I think this is so important. And my question is, how can policy solutions be grounded more in operational reality if the people that are designing them haven't personally dealt with commercial rent escalation, sanitation rules, sidewalk enforcement, insurance increasing, staffage shortages, Con Ed bills that increase from having complied with Local Law 97, permits, and day-to-day unpredictability of running a storefront in New York City?
That's a loaded question. Support open primaries.
Open to small business owners?
No, open to the 1.2 million people who can't vote in a primary right now. The Charter Commission was going to look at it, but probably won't look at it now.
I think that's a bit of also like a philosophical question there, where we have to a lot of our policymakers are lawyers. And I'm not saying that's like a bad thing, but that means also like when you have an overbalance of policymakers that are lawyers, they may not have built stuff, right? And that is a very different lived experience. So what that I think also looks like is that for policymakers, they need to recognize that they have to take time. And that also I think goes back to Randy's point earlier, where we as a society may also need to be able to accept some more risk, that sometimes when things happen and things go wrong, that what is our risk tolerance, right? Is that okay? Is that not okay? And are there interventions to correct that before we legislate? And
listening before legislating.
I think so, but also I think there also has to be just like a fundamental shift of how do we get people who are builders to be excited about civic engagement, and that's where I think it's really tough. It's a philosophical question.
But can't the onus be on the legislators and not the builders to have to go to that?
Yeah, but then I think it's like what becomes the onus of the legislators, and what ends up happening, right? Because they the fine, let's say in the instance of for Con Edison, right? I have friends who waited almost a year before Con Ed ended up coming to get gas. That onus fell onto the small business, and that they had to bear the cost. I'm not sure what is the mechanism for the legislator to understand that kind of reality beyond them not getting elected again.
Well, you notice Gail Brewer was the only one that stayed here and listened through the whole thing.
That's true, and then, right, that's where the civic engagement piece, I think, is important. Who's actually in the room, and yeah.
Well, how about we call out elected officials that start with, small businesses are the lifeblood of our communities and the backbone of our neighborhood. Say, well, okay, then why are you legislating against them? Like, that should be your response.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. On that note, I know we have a lot more work to do, but so round of applause for amazing panelists. Thank you all.
I also wanted to say thank you to our panelists. They were fabulous. I want to thank also the council members that were here, and let's actually give them a hand for actually being here. And, I get as frustrated as anybody when you go to you testify at a council hearing and all of them disappear after the first person, but a lot of them have hearings that they're running at 10 o'clock today, so that's why they didn't all stay. I want to give a big thanks to Wells Fargo and Chrissy. We really appreciate the support, and this was such a great event. I want to thank my staff at the Center for an Urban Future. I also want to ask a last question, if you guys can bear with me for 1 minute. This is a speed question. I really want 5 to 10 second answers, but I just want to say, ask everybody to go through, what's one thing super specific that you want Mayor Mamdani to do? Just one thing super specific to support mom and pops. Jessica?
Yeah, I would say the streamlining. If you can just put everything in one place so everybody knows what's missing, what's due, if they have a fine, make it easy. Make it very easy.
Excellent.
I would say for the mayor to sit down with business leaders and really think about reshaping the narrative of the Bronx.
Love that.
I would say improve public safety. So many small businesses are suffering from, retail theft and so forth. The mayor has to improve public safety.
Great. Vic?
I'm going to go back to what I said earlier on, the legacy distinction of for small businesses.
Thanks.
I'm going to give you 2.
No.
That's going to be very specific.
Okay.
Hire an EDC president that's pro-economic development.
Yes.
Very specific. And number 2 is, after we get done with indexing, give the enforcement agencies an absolute target to reduce fines and violations, a numerical target, just like we did on the housing. Give them a target.
I love that. All right, well, with that, let's have another round of applause. Thank you all for coming, and have a great day. All right.